Hello and welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lexi Herndon, Outreach Coordinator at the Environmental Finance Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Before we start the webinar, I want to go through a few technical details with you. This webinar is being recorded, and we will share the slides from the presentation and the recording with you within the next week. The webinar will last about an hour and 15 minutes, and we'll have some time to answer questions at the end. All participants will be muted throughout the webinar. To ask questions, please type them and submit them in the questions box that appears on your screen. Feel free to submit your questions at any time. We will queue your questions and answer them at the end of the webinar. If at any point you have any technical problems with GoToWebinar, please send us a note in the same questions box. I will be monitoring this box continuously and can communicate with you there. Once the webinar ends, you will automatically be emailed a link to a brief 5-minute survey. Your feedback is very important, and we'll use your input to help us improve future webinars. So thank you very much in advance for filling out our survey. And with us today, we have about 30 participants from across the state of Arizona and a couple folks in California and Texas, it looks like. So thank you all for joining us today. And just before we get started, I wanted to tell you that this webinar is being offered as part of the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project, which is funded through a cooperative agreement with the EPA. Through this project, the Environmental Finance Center Network offers free training and assistance to small water systems, or those serving fewer than 10,000 people, on finance and management topics. The Environmental Finance Center Network is a team of 8 university-based environmental finance centers from across the country, and we offer training and resources across all of our areas of expertise, which include fiscal planning and rate setting, asset management, energy management, funding programs, and more. And with that, I'll introduce our speakers. With us today, we have Jeff Hughes, Director of the Environmental Finance Center, as well as Jim Armstrong with the Arizona Corporation Commission, and Ray Jones of the Water Utilities Association of Arizona. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Lexi. It's a fairly short session today, but we have some brief objectives we hope to accomplish. As Lexi said, this is a focused webinar on the financial issues facing a subset of the small system water universe, and we really oriented this webinar to systems that are regulated by the Corporation Commission. This is part of a larger project that works with government-owned systems, private systems, nonprofit systems. Through that work, we've identified some unique financial issues facing regulated small water systems. And this is really our first webinar that's directly oriented to those regulated small water systems. So what we wanted to cover today was an overview of some of the issues. We wanted to really focus in on the issue of rate adjustment processes, and we've been lucky enough to get Mr. Armstrong to join us today and talk a little bit about the rules and processes that must go on in Arizona to get a rate adjustment approved. We're going to talk about some strategies for improving financial health in general, and then we'll finish the session with some resources and some next steps. During the whole interview, during the whole webinar, we'd like to ask you some questions. So right now, we're going to push out a poll. We know where you live, but we don't know how many people you serve. So if we could have the participants in the poll just answer the question they see in front of them, it will just give us an idea of who's in the audience. So if you are a utility, what's your service population? And this is number of people, not number of accounts. We'll give people a few more time to vote. I think we'll go ahead and close out the poll. Okay, thank you very much. Looks like it's a nice mixture. We have a few larger regulated utilities, a few very small regulated utilities, and then some mid-sized utilities. And as you know, if you work in any of these utilities and have worked for a larger or smaller utility at a time, there are certainly some unique issues depending on your size of your utility. Today, for the overview session, though, we're really going to cover material that should apply equally to at least all the small systems. Maybe the systems that are a little larger might find some of the information fairly basic, but I think for the smaller systems, hopefully it will get at some of your issues. The next question was, when was your last rate adjustment? Was it in the calendar year of 2014 and 15? Was it somewhere between 2010 and 2013, 2005 to 2009? Okay, we got a few more people voting. Great. Well, so this result mirrors what we've seen in our research, in that in Arizona we really have a diversity in how often utilities of all types are adjusting their rates. But what we've seen through our research is that more so than many other states where we've worked, there are a group of utilities, and in this case it looks like there's about 33% of you that it's been quite a while since you've had a rate increase. On the call, over 10% over 10 years. But even the group that's in 2005 to 2009, that's a fairly long time to go without a rate adjustment. And that's one of the reasons that we decided to have this webinar, because in talking to utilities, we know that in some of the utilities that fit into those last two categories, it's because you're efficient and because your costs are under control and you just don't need the revenue. But we're guessing that some of you in that bucket would like to have a rate adjustment, but there's been some challenges for you to go ahead and actually take the steps necessary to do it. I did want to show you throughout the webinar a few examples of some of the research that we've done in Arizona. One of the things that we have been tracking is is how long between rate increases. And what you're seeing in front of you now on the screen is results of a survey that we did in cooperation with the Water Infrastructure Finance Agency, WIFA. And it's a survey that looks at rate trends across the state, and you'll see that what we saw last year, statewide, there is diversity in how often utilities are getting rate increases, with quite a few utilities that have gone a long time since they've had a rate increase in the past. Now for a question about a self-assessment question. How would everybody describe their financial condition? Okay, I want to get as many votes as we can for this one. This one's an important question for us. Okay, I think we're... Okay. All right, well, it looks like we have a few of you out there that need some help, and we were a little tongue-in-cheek with the descriptions that we posted, but the on a respirator folks, we're here to help, and I hope that this webinar helps you. But For the folks that are on a respirator, one thing I meant to say in the beginning of the session is that this is really an overview session. The project that we have with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency does provide us with some resources to provide one-on-one assistance. So for the folks on a respirator, maybe we'll be able to solve all your problems in this webinar, but probably not, and we may want to follow up with you afterwards. But for those of you that are out of shape and putting on the pounds and just need a little bit of help, I think there's a lot of organizations in Arizona that have a lot of resources. And again, we hope that the webinar is helpful, and then if not, we can get you in touch with some additional resources. For those of you that are quite fit, we're going to give you an opportunity at the end of the webinar to throw out some ideas and comments, and we would love to know what your exercise regime is. What is it that has worked for you in Arizona, just so we can share that with some of your colleagues that are a little bit less fit out there. How would you answer this question? What is the most challenging part of putting together a rate case for those of you out there? Is it documentation, record keeping? Is it the cost of putting the application in? Is it the fact that your customers are pushing back, or is it some other reason? The votes are coming in. Okay, and push it out. Okay, well, we're going to talk about a few of these issues in a moment, but quite a few of you have another reason. What I'd like to ask is anyone that has another reason that wasn't up here, if you go into your chat box, you can actually just paraphrase what the biggest challenge for you has been for putting together a rate case, just in a paragraph format. So it's actually in the questions box. If you go into questions and just type in a phrase or two about what has been challenging to you. We really want to try to address the challenges of folks on the call, so it would be helpful for us to know what your big key issue is. But for the other ones here, we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies for dealing with those issues. Okay. One of the things that we do at the Environmental Finance Center is quite a bit of research at the state level on water and sewer rate trends, and I will bring your attention to some resources that you may want to take a look at after the call. We have an annual summary of water and sewer rates, as well as an active, dynamic, real-time dashboard on the right that you can actually go in, pull up the name of your utility, and see some different financial components about your operation. So a lot of people have told us that it's very useful for them to understand where they are related to the rest of the state. At the same time, we urge folks to not read too much into that. Rate setting is really about dealing with your own cost issues. So just because you may have more expensive or less expensive rates than one of your neighbors doesn't necessarily mean your rates are too high or you're too low. But we know in reality, comparative pressure is out there, so this is a tool that hopefully will provide you some assistance. Some of the results from our most recent research are interesting to look at. We do see, if you look at the table now of rates across the state, we do see that the smaller utilities, as we'd expect, do have higher rates than the larger utilities, with water utilities that are under 1,000 people having some of the highest rates on average across the state, and the larger utilities with lower rates. We also looked at rates based on the type of ownership model, and this chart shows you that the for-profits do have a little bit of different rate trends than the government and the county and the municipality. particularly in the sewer side. You'll see on this chart that the for-profit regulated utilities tend to have much higher sewer rates than some of the other models, as well as a bit higher on the water side, at least than the city systems in the state. The other thing I wanted to point out before anyone gets too excited about averages and median rates is that what we find across the state is really a spectrum of rates. And again, this is just to reinforce rate setting is really about understanding your own costs. And we like to look at comparative rate setting by looking at large bands of utilities. And this chart shows you just the 80% band of utilities across the state. And we like to say that if you're a utility and you fit somewhere in this large band, you're probably doing okay. To be fixated on the median rate, given the different attributes of utilities across Arizona, is probably misguided. Arizona has lots of different local circumstances that impact the cost of rates. So again, there are some limits about what you can do with comparative data. That's mainly some background to get us going. Wanted to move into a little bit the strategy and the process side. If you could have anything to help your fiscal situation, again, a little bit of a humorous question, but with some serious intent behind it. What do you think? Would help? Would a rate increase improve your financial condition more than anything else? Would you like to have more staff resources, a bookkeeper, a CPA? Do you just want a nice, juicy, low interest loan? Do you want a lot of new customers? Or do you want to actually get out of the business and have someone buy your system altogether? Okay, we're getting some good responses. I ask everybody to keep going. Okay, we can push it out. Okay, interesting blend of answers. The low interest loan for capital investment seems to be the present that everybody is, or at least half of you are looking for. We are going to talk a little bit about some funding sources at the end of the webinar. But I think this just does reinforce our belief that not one strategy is going to solve all the problems of different utilities on the ground. And we are going to talk quite a bit about rate increases, and that is, for many of you, a quarter of you, the key thing that you're looking for, but it's not going to be everybody's answer. I will say, and we're going to reinforce this throughout the webinar, that some of these other issues probably won't help you very much if your rates are not sufficient. So the low interest loan for capital investment, the key thing there was we did present this as a low interest loan, and if you don't have the rate revenue to pay off that low interest loan, it's probably not going to be that useful for you. So we have worked with small systems in the past that were offered very, very favorable loan terms, but when we ran the numbers, their rates just didn't generate the revenue. And I think you'll find even the fairly generous funding providers in Arizona, particularly the ones that do low interest loans, they are going to pay some rigorous attention to your rates and your ability to pay off. So while they're highly subsidized loans in some situations, you still have to have the rate infrastructure to hold those loans. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Jim Armstrong, who's going to talk a little bit about the process for addressing rates. And Jim, feel free to comment on anything I just said as well.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And first I want to thank you for letting us join the webinar today. Hopefully I can provide some information that will be helpful to some of the participants. But let me start out first, just a bit of an introduction. I am the chief accountant. I head up what's referred to as the finance and regulatory analysis section of the utilities division, and that means that my group is a group that handles the review of all rate filings, financing applications, and things of that nature. So if you file a rate case here in Arizona, we will probably get a chance to meet and discuss issues at some point. Go to the next slide, please. Part of this is just overview, and many of you are probably aware of what I'm going to talk about in these next couple of slides, but it's just to sort of hit some of the high points. As you may well know, the Arizona Corporation Commission, or the ACC, is the agency that's responsible for approving the rate structures for the public service corporations operating in Arizona, and they also approve financing applications and CCN approval requests. Of course, we've got that second bullet point on there twice, but as I mentioned earlier, my group will be handling any fines that fall under these categories, and then of course anytime there's general questions about rate issues, many times those type of things will fall to our group as well. Next slide. Like most commissions, there is a website that I believe it would be helpful to spend some time taking a look at. The main thing is there's a lot of useful forms, helpful forms on the website. And when you go to the website, and that's azcc.gov, as you can see down at the bottom there, if you find the utilities division section and click on that area, then you will bring up these other forms and other bits of information. But some of the information you will find will be the commission rules regarding water and wastewater systems, quite a number of rate application forms and other forms such as best management practice or program templates, and then also some forms for submitting the annual reports, which we'll talk about more here in just a moment. Next slide. And the Arizona Administrative Code is here are the sections that really give you the details regarding our general processes in Arizona, as well as the rules that apply specifically to either water utilities or wastewater utilities. So if you're preparing a filing, it'd be very helpful for you to go through these administrative code sections and make sure that you understand what's required, and then obviously follow those code sections when you do process your application. Next slide. We also, I wanted to point out that not too long ago in Arizona, we did change the utility classifications so that we have a lot more of our utilities that are in the D and E class, and therefore the case processing times are much faster than they were previously. And just to give you an idea, for the water companies, I believe we went from, for example, 31 A and B utilities under the former classifications. We've got 13 now, and the E utilities, which are the smallest class, we had 64 utilities that fell under the E classification. Now we have 139, and obviously that means if you look at the filing schedule that many more of the utilities would have a shorter processing time for their rate applications, and of course getting money to the systems is really the important factor here. So the shorter lag time is certainly what should work to the advantage of many of the smaller companies that we regulate. Okay, next slide. my primary focus is going to be on rate case filings, and let me sort of reach back to some of those survey questions and make a couple of observations. I believe it was the last question that talked about what would be the best thing that could happen to your systems, and if you look at the results, 25%, as I recall, wanted rate increase, and 50% wanted cheap money, and cash flow is the name of the game, and getting the cash to these systems is really the answer. You can't operate systems as well as they need to be operated without adequate cash flows. So I think understanding the rate case filing, and while they may be challenging and costly, you know, they are the way that we need to go about adjusting rates. And when utilities go for 10 or 15 years without adjusting rates, not only do they have difficulty maintaining their system and providing good service, but you have more pushback when rate cases are filed, because the increases may be, you know, extremely dramatic. You may have rates that double or triple, where a rate case every 3 to 5 years may keep you better positioned, as well as having your customers deal with an increase that might be 30 or 40% as opposed to 300%. So that's important, and also one of the reasons why the Commission encourages small utilities to file periodic rate applications to promote rate gradualism, and then also, like I said, to better have the utilities in position to pay their bills. Next slide. This is just an observation that in some respects is a little counter to what we saw in the survey results, but I wanted to say that we do require annual report filings every year, and for the last 2 years, my group has looked more closely at those filings, and in this last year, we found 35% of those reports had significant accounting shortcomings, and I mean everything from balance sheets that don't balance up to out to just data that was incomplete. So it really shows a real problem with a lot of these smaller companies and being able to understand and maintain good accounting. And even though I believe the other survey said that there were only 10% of the participants who thought there were problems in maintaining good documentation, I suspect if we were to have everybody on the phone and not just the ones that are here today, that number would be much higher, just as a result of what we've seen. And it's a real problem, because I invite these companies to call and discuss the problems, and they do so. And when I'm done, when we're done, I oftentimes I don't believe they have any better understanding than they did when we had the call, and it's unfortunate, because having good documentation and good information not only allows you to get those costs addressed in your rates, but it also makes it easier to support and process a rate filing, because the information that's in a complete annual report provides much of the information that's needed to file in support for a rate increase. So if you can't file the annual reports, then you can understand why many companies have problems processing and filing a full rate case. So it's just another sign of how, you know, deep some of these problems go, at least in my opinion. Next slide. Okay, maintaining good documentation is a must. Without it, we have trouble developing recommendations, and it just works to your advantage, because if we can't get an invoice or can't get some good documentation, we're really have a lot of problems trying to justify including cost recoveries that a small utility might well be entitled to. So make sure you're in a good position. Make sure you maintain that information so that you can provide staff with support for your costs. you know going in we're going to ask for the invoices and support, so make sure you have it, because if you do have that support, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to get through the filing without any problems, and certainly be able to understand and recommend cost increases that align with what your actual system needs are. Next slide. Data requests. I mean, you're going to receive data requests, and I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of companies don't file, because when they get data requests, they go into some panic mode, and perhaps that is just because sometimes the questions seem overwhelming. But if you go into a rate case viewing data requests as an opportunity for you to explain the reasonableness of your request, then you understand that answering those questions is there to help you. It can take issues off the table. It can help us understand your needs, and certainly get us in a position where we can support the reasonableness of your request. Now, if you do have questions or don't understand what we're asking, you're always invited to call and discuss those questions. If there's some circumstance that makes it impossible for you to provide certain information, then we need to know that. We can try to work through it. But just doing your best to respond to those data requests gets us through our review process, and quite honestly, as I said, can be best viewed as an opportunity for you to explain and support the reasonableness of your request. And then make sure you understand, particularly smaller systems, that if you do need to retain the services of a rate-making expert, a reasonable level of those costs can be recovered through your rate structure. So if you incur a cost of say $50,000 and you amortize that over 5 years, then you're going to get full recovery, though it will be over a 5-year period. But you will get to recover a reasonable level of those costs. All right. I don't know that I had too much else to say other than I really think that we need to understand that the commission staff is here to try to assist you with your rate filings. We work with a lot of small companies, and we're here to try to answer your questions and do our best to help you through the process. So do your best by getting the support ready and the information there that will help us understand the basis of your request. But by all means, call and ask us about any questions you might have, and we'll try to help you through the rate filing process. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Sure.
Okay, well now we're going to go ahead and turn it to Ray to hear the perspective from an association that works with and represents many utilities across Arizona.
Hi, I'm the
We're all set.
Director. Thanks, Jeff. As noted on the slide, I'm the Executive Director of the Water Utilities Association.
Ray, we seem to have lost you there. Hold on with us just a minute, folks. We're going to try to get Ray back on the line with us. I think maybe as we're waiting for Ray to come back, we had a question come in over our system. So the question is, can a not-for-profit HOA in Arizona submit an application for an adjustment? If so, can a rate increase be submitted simultaneously?
Jim, I think I'm going to leave that question for you, if you can answer it.
Okay, a not-for-profit homeowners association?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. Well, certainly if they're recognized as a public service corporation, and they may or may not be. I mean, it may be that we don't have any jurisdiction at all. but as long as it is in fact a public service corporation, then they would follow the same rules and the rate increase process as any other company. I guess I'm struggling a little bit with what the question might be. I assume that they are regulated since they're participating in this webinar. But if you want to read through the question one more time, I'll see if there's anything else I need to add or can add.
Well, I think it was also a process question. Question is assuming that they can they submit an application for adjudication, and if so, can a rate increase be submitted simultaneously?
Okay, it may be that you'd have to file a separate request and then ask that the matters be consolidated, and that's usually not an overly difficult exercise. The rate case filing guidelines would perhaps be the most important. If they don't think that there's commission jurisdiction, then you may need to work through that separate. But again, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the question.
Okay, well, I think we might have Ray back, and for the person that asked that question, we can also follow up with you offline. We can try to figure out what that is and get you some more information. Ray, are you back with us?
I am here, Jeff.
Okay, I think we just lost you maybe through the internet somewhere, but it's all yours again. You got the floor.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm as noted, the executive director of WAA, and I guess just for full disclosure for everyone, I'm also an engineering and regulatory consultant as well. And our next slide here is basically answering the question, who is the Water Utilities Association of Arizona? Well, we're the largest association of investor-owned water and wastewater utilities. Our membership ranges from some of the very smallest companies in the state of Arizona to the absolute largest. We represent, through our members, about 1/3 of all the companies in Arizona, and that third of the companies capture something like 3/4 of all the water utility revenue for the private utilities in Arizona. Our mission is kind of a threefold mission. We focus a lot on member education on regulatory issues, and that may be Arizona Corporation Commission related, as we're doing today. We also focus on the Department of Water Resources, Department of Environmental Quality, and the CAP, Central Arizona Project, and the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District issues. We provide regulatory support for our members, which can take the form of general assistance by access to the expertise of our members and education, such as we're doing today. And one of the things I do for members is I assist them with scheduling and attend meetings with company representatives, with the commissioners, and with the Corporation Commission staff. And often that can be a very helpful pre-step to asking for regulatory relief. The more you can educate the commission and the staff on your company and its needs before you file a rate case, typically the smoother your rate case will go. We also, with a focus on the ACC commissioners and staff, work on regulatory improvement and reform. And our next slide addresses what our current focus is for the small water companies. I saw one of the questions that had come up was regarding rate design, and that is actually the Water Utility Association's #1 priority of late. We're promoting rate designs that will yield revenue stability for our members. I think everyone on this call knows that water utilities are a high fixed cost business, and we've been working hard with the Commission to try to encourage more of your charges to be in the base charge. We would like to advocate something in the 50% range. of your revenue should come from base charges, and then we would advocate limiting upper tier or third tier revenue to about 10% of your rate design. And this is particularly one area that I think there's been a lot of progress on recently, and I think that all the companies will see better, more revenue stability enhancing rate designs going forward. At least I'm hopeful of that. Another one of the big issues I hear from small companies all the time is that my business is much riskier than one of the large multi-million-dollar utilities, and certainly WAA's position is that is true. Small companies face many challenges that increase their risk relative to the larger companies, and we're working again with the ACC to try to get the ACC to recognize that small company risk. There's been, I think, some movement on that as compared to historically, but I think we've still got work to do there. We're planning on sticking with that issue to help small companies. In terms of the process, we're always looking for ways to work with staff to simplify the process and encourage settlement of cases, which can sometimes bring them to a quicker conclusion. We heard Jim say earlier that the various classifications of water utilities were changed. As Jim noted, that made many more companies D&Es, and probably the significant major advantage to being classified smaller is that your rate cases go faster and less paperwork is required to put a rate case through. Arizona is a historic test year state, so we have a lot of regulatory lag, and what that means is rates tend to lag the incurring of the costs that go along with those rates. We've advocated for adjuster mechanisms, both on the expense and the capital side. We're starting to see some of those implemented for some of our larger companies, and it is the long-term goal to simplify, I guess, as those mechanisms become more routine, is to try to simplify them and expand them so they'll be more available and useful to the smaller companies as well. Next slide. Industry perspective on the rate case. First, I'd just like to say that I don't disagree with anything that Mr. Armstrong had presented earlier. The current staff at the commission, I think, is working hard to help the private utility industry. I think they recognize many of the needs of our industry, and they are actually working hard. And I know some of our members, and probably some on this phone, have been afraid to go in for rate cases. They've heard some of the horror stories. It's been my experience that a lot of that, most of that, is in the past, and rate cases can be challenging, but they're absolutely necessary. They're just part of our business. If you're not having rate cases, your business will undoubtedly suffer. Jim noted that more often is better. Absolutely agree with that. Customers would prefer several small increases over one large increase. But one thing I observed, particularly for small companies, that's just not always possible. Small companies tend to have very uneven investment. They may put a new tank in. That might drive a large rate increase, but if they don't do another major expenditure for 7 or 8 or 10 years, they may not need to do another rate increase for 7 or 8 or 10 years. Whereas large companies can often structure their needs so that they can go in every few years. To the extent you can do that, it's always better, but unfortunately, I think this is one of the issues small companies face that drives their risk up. Jim mentioned accounting records and annual reports. There's absolutely no doubt that better accounting records, accurate annual reports lead directly to successful rate cases. You must know where you stand, and unfortunately, many of the CPAs used by the small company providers really don't do utility accounting. And I've worked with many companies who've had their books and records prepared by a CPA at the end of each year. They're not using the right accounting rules for utility companies, and often, even though they look to be good records and they appear to be accurate, when we get into rate cases, they really are not. Jim mentioned documentation. It's absolutely vital. Capital expenditures, you need all of your invoices back to your last rate case. If you have those, your rate case will go pretty smoothly. If you don't, you're liable to have quite a bit of trouble. Operational expenses, not quite as long of a need, but I recommend keeping them at least for 3 or 4 years. 3 is a minimum, 4 is probably better. Also, your operational data, how much you're pumping from your wells, what your sales to your customers are, your customer counts, and accurate and complete billing records. Again, it's very helpful to have those going back 3 or 4 years as well. So as you're planning a rate case, these are some of the things to think about, and make sure you're pulling these data together and preserving them as you approach your rate case. Next slide. How do you file a rate case? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. If your company has under $1 million in revenue, which, as Jim explained, many of our companies do, these would be your Class D and E's, you can file what's called a short form application. It's a good thing. It's a simplified filing, and it can absolutely be done without using a consultant. However, there's just kind of one issue or problem with that short form. It really doesn't require you to figure out everything you need to know about your rate case when you file that short form application. And so you got to be a little bit careful using it, and we'll go on the next slide. We'll talk more about some of the questions you need to be able to make sure you can answer. There's also the long form application. It's pretty complicated. Almost always requires a consultant. The good news is that if you're these Class D and E companies, this whole process from the time you file until you implement your rates can take as short as 5 to 7 months. So it's pretty quick for the small companies. Next slide. I get a lot of questions, do I need a consultant? And what I did here is I said, well, to answer that, a water company needs to ask themselves some questions. Probably first and foremost, do you have all the required accounting records and documentation we talked about? If you don't, you may need a consultant to help you make your case, because without the records, it is going to be a tough case to make. Next thing I'd ask myself is, can I determine my company's rate base, my company's rate of return on the rate base, and my company's operating margin? And when I said the short form doesn't force you to figure out everything you need to know, well, these are the 3 things you need to know. And if you can figure those out, if you know the answers to those questions, then you probably can consider going forward without a consultant. I guarantee you the ACC staff, Jim Armstrong and his team, they will determine those things, and in large part your rate increase will be based on those calculations. And there's been more than one company over the years who didn't know these when they filed, and a company that files without knowing these can be in for a surprise, and it is not unheard of for small companies to ask for a rate increase and come out of the process with a rate decrease because they didn't know these things on the front end. And then the last section here, I say, do I know with certainty? And the with certainty kind of goes back to my caution that sometimes people's outside accountants and CPAs aren't actually doing utility accounting with their books. And so you need to be sure you're doing utility accounting and that your revenue matches your customer billings, that your accumulated depreciation balances are correct, and that you correctly accounted for and amortized all your developer-provided funds. These are the major adjustments typically made by Jim Armstrong and his group in a rate filing, and that is because they are typically the things that small companies get wrong, and again, I'll caution, even if they're using outside CPAs to help them with their accounting. So I guess summing up this slide, if your answer is no to any of these questions, you might benefit from going ahead and getting a consultant for your rate work. On our next slide is sort of some special circumstances that may get you to think you want a consultant. Are you a standalone water company, or do you share facilities, personnel, or expenses with any other business? And some examples are I work with clients who have regulated and non-regulated businesses running out of a common office, often sharing rent expense, sometimes sharing employees, utility expenses. If you're doing those sorts of things, that's something to be aware of. We often see small companies who rent their office from the owner of the company. Again, something to take a close look at. I've even seen a handful of companies who actually rent their wells from the owner of the company. And anytime you're doing those kind of things, you're getting into a cost allocation model that can be difficult, and it's often a contested item in a rate case. You may need a consultant to help you put that together properly so that you have a strong case before the commission. Another item that trips up small companies is there may be personal expenses or non-utility expenses being paid by the water company. I've seen over the years vehicle expenses, sometimes personal travel expenses for the owner paid from the water company funds, personal utility bills at the owner's home paid from the water company accounts, things like that. I can assure you that Jim Armstrong and his staff will identify and those types of expenses. They will be removed from your expenses and from your rates. And so you need to make sure you have a handle on those things. And probably the last word of caution I'll throw out, and we see this a lot again with small companies, does anyone that works for your water company being paid for other than hours worked or at other than market rates? And what we're talking about here is family members on the payroll. It's not terribly unusual to find a brother of the owner, the son of the owner, or grandma on the payroll, but they aren't actually working for the company. They're on the payroll because of a long-standing arrangement that may have been in place for many years, may have been there for good reason, but it's very difficult to get that kind of salary expense recovered in a rate case. And another, I guess, aspect of that is if a small company owner actually works the company and runs the company, he still needs to take a market-based salary for that work. If the salary being drawn is too large for the size of the company or for the scope of the company's operations, that can also be something that can be problematic in a rate case. So on this slide, if you answer yes to any of these questions, you may want to think about the benefits a consultant might be able to bring you. And I guess the bottom line, and I'll wrap up my presentation with saying, is that if you can put together a solid, well-supported rate case, whether you can do that in-house or with the use of consultants, you should go ahead and file with the Corporation Commission. And as Jim said, if you put forth a good case, they're there to help, and they will get you the financial help that you need.
Great. Thanks very much, Ray. If you have a question for Ray now while it's fresh in your mind, go ahead and everybody feel free to type in a question. I did want to just go over a few other points. Ray and Jim had some great, very specific recommendations related to rate adjustments. We do find that rate adjustments are essential, but there are some other strategies for improving your financial condition that have been quite helpful to many small utilities, and some that are essential to integrate in with your rate adjustment strategies. For example, there's a bullet on here about cost reduction. I think most utilities are fairly diligent about their cost control. We do see a lot of the smaller utilities that buy water from another utility have potential to either lose a lot of money with a water line leak just because of the way that their cost structure is set up, and they have to buy all the water that they go on and resell. So we have seen a few utilities that have been able to generate significant economic savings by reducing their water loss. Same with energy, particularly sewer plants that have pumps or water systems that rely on a lot of pumping. We have seen examples where their energy contract or their energy rate structure can be modified and they can reduce something. In most cases, we don't see utilities generate a tremendous amount of extra revenue through these savings, but what we do find is having a cost reduction plan and telling your customers about it and telling your board about it is an essential part of selling a rate increase. One of you suggested that the main problem you had with rate increases was convincing your board, and we see that quite a bit. Whether your board is a for-profit board or whether you're a government entity and have a governmental board, sometimes there's a disconnect between the staff who see the needs day to day and the governing board. So being able to show that you're on top of costs is just absolutely essential. Ray mentioned the idea of rate structures as being as important as rate adjustments. We've definitely seen that to be an issue in our work. The average water use throughout the country has been falling, and utilities that don't have a handle on looking forward a few years, realizing that their customers are likely to be using less water through the acquisition of water efficient washing machines and new fixtures. If you're not on top of your planning and forecasting, you can really get yourself into a bind. So I think the pricing structure changes that Ray talked about are really an essential part, not just adjustments, but actually changing the pricing structure. Haven't had much interest on this call in consolidation. No one said they were looking for a buyer for their system, but we have worked with a number of utilities out there that really, when you get down to the end of it, no rate increase is going to get them out of their financial challenges. And the fact is that there are some utilities that are just too small to go it alone. And we do see that with those utilities, having at least a solid rate structure in place is really the essential part of any type of negotiation with a partner. In many cases, the assets themselves are worth less than the customers and the revenue stream the customers generate. So, you know, somebody that's fixated on the book value of their water utility, but they haven't raised rates in 5 or 6 years, is going to have a very hard time negotiating with an owner. Last I'll say is that there are some interesting sources of capital investment and access out there. I think Arizona is fortunate to be in a state where the largest public finance entity, the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, does support private water systems. That's not the case in many states where we work, but WIFA does have programs that will provide interest rates as low as prime, longer-term interest rates than probably a small water system could ever hope to get from a commercial bank. But when you look through WIFA's guidelines, you will see that you don't go far without starting to see that even though WIFA is a public entity, they care about getting paid back as much as a private bank does. So really, it does get back to the underlying financial strength of a particular utility to show that they have enough revenue to lead to revenue that can pay back debt, to have revenue that gives a healthy operating ratio. So these are all basic fundamentals that if they're not in order, those of you that are hoping for that big fat low interest grant, or excuse me, low interest loan for Christmas, you're not going to get very far with it if you don't have the rate setting part of your house in order. With that, I would like to see if Ray or Jim have any other kind of closing comments about strategies other than what they've already mentioned to say, and then we'll look and see if there's any questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So, Jim, Ray, any other comments about things I've said or anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, this is Ray. I think I would just echo your comments about the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. They're for small water companies, from a practical standpoint, they're really for many companies, are the only source of a loan. They do have very good interest rates, and they are also very good at working with Jim Armstrong and his group so that financing applications and rate increase applications can be processed together. We see that often for small companies. And so if you do need to make improvements, we really encourage you to talk to WIFA, talk with Jim and his team, and I think they're pretty good at working together to get small companies the rate relief they need to support the WIFA financing that they're requesting.
Yeah, this is Jim. Yeah, we work real closely with WIFA. I mean, I talk to them every week on one issue or another, and we do try to make sure we're working together to do what we can to see the utilities can wrap up their financing arrangements through WIFA. The one thing I guess I would add is particularly if you're facing some rather substantial future capital needs, as most small water companies are, now's the time to get your other financial issues well in hand. If you've got accounting problems or you've got an inability to document and so on, I mean, you need to get that in hand so that when you're getting close to needing to docket a financing application, we can roll that into a companion rate case and have a pretty good success expectation of being able to get both the rate case and the financing done. So if you're going to be looking at financing, also look at those rate case needs, because WIFA does and we certainly do, and you need to have everything sort of going in synchronization here.
Okay, well, great. Well, we're going to ask you a poll question, and then we do see a few questions coming in. I think the webinar is slated to go to 5:15, so we do have a few more minutes for questions. So we do see a few of them coming in. So please, if you have a question you want to ask, go ahead and type it in the question box. Meanwhile, we did say at the outset that we knew that there was going to be things that we would like to do in the future to provide some assistance. So we'd just like to get a rough idea from the folks that have stuck with us. What type of follow-up assistance to this type of webinar would be helpful for you? Would you like something in person? A training course on financial management included rate setting. Is it more of just an ability to share ideas and a forum to share practices with other small systems that you're looking for? Would you like some sort of on-site bookkeeping and advising assistance, or actual assistance putting together or funding a rate setting application? So again, this is just to give us an idea as we work forward with different organizations, both in Arizona as well, and just what can we do to provide some benefits. Okay, thanks for that. All right, so there's a few resources that I think we keep coming back to. Certainly, WIFA has come out as a real key player. Our organization has had a long partnership with WIFA, and we've been working on some of the rate setting research that I told you about. You can see the link to it here. What we're going to do for those of you that are on the call, we're going to send you out an email with the link to this presentation, as well as a short compendium of resources that were linked to any of the questions that we heard on the call. For example, we had one person talk about a comment about wanting to have information to convince a board about a rate setting case. We have some material that we've developed for some other water utilities that we'll put a link to in that case. So we'll put it out, as well as putting some links out to some of the other organizations. We talked a little bit about DEQ, another group that is available to provide some management assistance to utilities in Arizona. So let's turn, and I think there's a few minutes left for some questions. We had a question about, can you build your own rate base? And I'm assuming this is if you don't have a lot of documentation, can you kind of craft your own rate base? But if I got that wrong for the person that asked this question, you could clarify. But the question as it came in was, can you build your own rate base? So does that, Jim, does that make sense to you? And any feedback on that?
Well, this is Jim. I don't know whether or not that's the question, whether they're talking about actually developing the contents of your rate base, or whether they're really talking about the physical assets. So I mean, that obviously might take two different directions. Your rate base, and if you're talking about building rate base, you do need to build that. You need to have the ability to structure your, identify and layer in your investments year by year. So from that perspective, you are building your rate base, and then some aspects of rate base, like maybe cash working capital or prepayments or whatever, that obviously is something you're going to have to develop as well. So if that's the question, then you do need to build that and be responsible for developing and identifying what you think your rate base is. If your other question is about whether you can actually use your own people to construct your rate base, maybe Ray, being an engineer, can address that. I mean, that's certainly possible if you've got the expertise, but I'll let Ray answer that one if that's the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they're asking. If they're asking, can you calculate your own rate base? It's actually very simple to calculate your rate base. If it comes back to what Jim had presented, if your accounting records and your annual report are correct, it's very easy to figure out what your rate base is. The problem that I see with many companies is their year-to-year processing of plant additions and retirements is not complete. Often the depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation are not calculated correctly. With some companies, it can actually be, small companies, it can actually be quite complex to calculate depreciation properly. Many companies have fully depreciated portions of their plant and things that have to be accounted for. It can actually be quite difficult. And then the third part I mentioned too was the developer funds sort of backfeed into all these calculations. And if you get as your processes and get a handle on those things, then there's no reason you can't really almost know your rate base at any point in time. But it's difficult to do well, and it takes some work. If you're talking about, can you build your rate base? Can you make investments in your system and build your rate base? I mean, the answer is absolutely yes, and probably most small companies need some form of investment in deteriorating or undersized facilities. I think the challenge with doing it is, as we've discussed, it's getting the financing and the capital necessary to do it. So it's I think, as I mentioned, these small water companies face a lot of challenges, and it takes I think a lot of hard work. And I see a lot of people working really hard out there with small water companies to meet the needs of these small communities where they operate.
Great. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. If people have a last-minute question they want to ask, we can give people another minute or two. But otherwise, I think we've wrapped up for the day. Anybody on the call, Ray or Jim, do you have any other closing remarks? Otherwise, I think we're going to go ahead and close this down. For those of you on the call, we really appreciate it. We really appreciate it today. And look for that email. And this really, for us, is the start of what we hope to do in providing support that's a little bit more specific to private water systems. So if you have any ideas for us on how to make these kind of events more useful, or anything we should be doing, please don't hesitate to contact us. So Jim, Ray, any last thoughts?
No, not really. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ray.
I was just going to say, yes, thank you for the opportunity. That's really all I have.
Okay, well, we wish everybody a safe holiday, and we look for an email from us. Take care.
And thanks, everyone. Just a reminder, please do fill out the evaluation survey that you'll see after we close down the webinar and in your email. And have a great afternoon.
Thank you.